Climate-fueled wildfires have been ravaging the state of California for several years now. The unfortunate conditions as a result of drought, coupled with a deregulated private utility company like PG&E, has spelled a recipe for disaster. But now we're finding that the victims of these wildfires, who are supposed to be compensated by PG&E and their negligence, are unfortunately now relying on the whims of Wall Street regarding their payouts. And this is why this whole system is incredibly screwed up. As CNBC reports, the Victim Relief Trust received 478 million shares of the reorganized company's stock, making it the utility's largest shareholder. So essentially, in a settlement, PG&E agreed to provide shares of their stock to the trust, which is supposed to pay out money to the victims of these wildfires, which PG&E has contributed to. The fund is meant to compensate more than 70,000 victims of 24 wildfires, including the devastating Camp Fire, which killed at least 84 people and destroyed much of the town of Paradise in 2018. The largest and most destructive fire in California history. An investigation found that the fire was caused by the failure of a piece of equipment known as a C-hook on a century-old PG&E transmission tower. In fact, PG&E not only operates here in California, but unfortunately also operates in states like Nevada, where they do not invest in what they have promised to invest in. Things like ensuring that vegetation in the area where their equipment is cleared, so if there is any type of equipment mishap, it doesn't spark any type of fire. I want to show you this quick video to kind of give you a sense of how much they skirt their responsibilities in the pursuit of profits.
Internal records, incriminating evidence showing that PG&E is decimating its tree trimming budget. One contractor reports that its workforce has been reduced 49.7%. And even PG&E's own employees send warnings. The potential for a major fire is very real. And it's not just cutting budgets. Ross learns that PG&E actually diverts nearly $80 million earmarked to trim trees into company profits.
They sacrifice safety. Money that should have been put into making sure their lines were safe went into their own pockets and into the pockets of their shareholders.
So as I mentioned, now some of the shareholders include the victims who lost their homes, some of whom lost their family members as a result of these fires in California. But here's the problem. A court-appointed trustee, his name is John Trotter, of the Fire Victim Trust, said that the victims of the fire should actually root for this private utility company's success because their money is tied to how well the stock performs. He says you are 25 or 24.5% owners of PG&E, and so it's important for you to want PG&E to do well. The old PG&E, I don't have to tell you, was certainly less than a model corporate citizen. The new PG&E, which now appears regularly in front of the California Utilities Commission, is trying much harder and doing a much better job. But really, taking the fact that the money that they're given as a result of this relief fund is tied to how well PG&E performs in the stock market. And that is insane. I'll give you more details in a second, but Cenk.
Yeah, there's two different issues here. So let's start with that one. So they say, okay, we're not gonna give you $100. We'll use a round number just to make it simple for the analogy. We're not gonna give you the cash, God forbid. We're gonna give it to you in stock, okay? So now, why is this a really bad idea? Now, if the stock goes up and your $100 turns into $150, you're not gonna complain. Let's keep it real, okay? You're gonna say, oh, well, got more than I expected, right? But if your $100 goes down to $50 because their price went down, you're gonna be really mad.
Sad day for you.
Right, and so, but not only does that rob you of the $50 you deserve because the settlement was $100, okay? But it's also set up so that people will be like, we'll either get a windfall or we'll be super mad if the price goes down, and justifiably so. So I don't know why they did it this way. Maybe they were cash poor and that was the only way they could do it. Or maybe it's because they wanted people to root for PG&E. Now they're the biggest stockholders, right?
Right.
And so,
of course they wanted that. Of course they wanted it. I think that was very intentional. And let me also just keep in mind, I want you all to keep in mind that when PG&E was found liable for some of these wildfires as a result of them refusing to invest in improving their own equipment, Governor Gavin Newsom of California decided to use taxpayer money to bail them out as they were going bankrupt as a result of all the lawsuits they were facing. So taxpayers in California bailed them out. And now the victims of these fires are being told, you better root for the success of this private company that screwed you over, because their success means that you'll be compensated appropriately for the damage that was done to your life.
Well, that actually then leads back to the second issue, which is what Anna started with. So they didn't repair electrical wires and that caused the fire in the first place. They were 100 years old, 100 years old. Now think about why. It's a natural monopoly, okay? And so that's a term that people have been aware of since Adam Smith. So you don't have a choice. You can't be like, hey, I'd like to get my electricity from some other line that's coming into my house. No, there's one line coming into your house and you don't have a choice, okay? That's called a natural monopoly. When you have that, it must be really tightly regulated. Because if it's not regulated, they can go, okay, I'm charging you more now. Because you need the electricity, I can charge you $100, I'm gonna charge you $200, I'm gonna charge you $1,000. There's nothing you could do. Otherwise, your refrigerator won't work, you can't turn on the lights, etc. So now the government does regulate somewhat on the price, but there's gonna be a huge twist on that. But then they say, in California, they're pretty much like, certainly in Texas, right? But notice, in Texas it's Republicans, in California it's Democrats, we're getting robbed either way, okay? And so in California, they say, don't worry, you don't have to repair anything. They should actually bury the electrical wires. That's what everybody else does all across the world. But that's because no other country allows legalized bribery like we do. So what does PG&E do? And that report partly explained it. They're like, well, if we can't raise the price too much, what we could do is cut the cost, and that way we'll have more profit. Now, when we cut the costs, meaning we don't repair the wires, we don't bury the wires, we know for a fact there's gonna be more fires, and we know more people are gonna die and more houses are gonna burn down, but we're gonna make an extra buck. And then we're gonna leave the company and nobody will ever catch us. The executives, some of the earlier shareholders will all get incredibly rich, and then we'll dump it on the lap of the people we burned down. Now, that's outrageous. Why would our government let them get away with it? Because PG&E was one of the top donors to Democrats and politicians overall in the state of California. We allow legalized bribery, so obviously we get a bunch of criminals that sometimes literally burn our house down for a profit.
No, I mean, really think about it, guys. I know it's frustrating when you hear these arguments that equate the Democrats to the Republicans, but on some issues, they do seem incredibly similar, which is why our politics has just boiled down to cults of personality and culture wars. When you have a corrupt political system that allows for legalized bribery of both parties, well, they're going to represent the best interests of those corporate donors instead of their own constituents and their own voters, their own base. That's what we're seeing right now. So when you're asking yourself, why are politicians engaging in these ridiculous debates on issues that don't really matter, whether it be the war on Christmas or whatever it is, right? Know that that's actually very much intentional, because it deflects from the similarities that both parties really do have when it comes to these bread and butter issues, when it comes to climate action, when it comes to the situations and the policies that actually do impact our daily lives.
Yeah, so look, we've told you a million times, we do a nuance on this show. So is there a difference between Democrats and Republicans? Yes. There's differences on social issues, big differences. On the other hand, are there differences in economic issues? No, almost none. The rest of the press will not tell you that. They'll say, oh no, my God, the Democrats are lovely and beautiful and fell down from heaven. And most of the corporate Republicans are too, but Trump's a bad guy. Okay, so that's how they'll synthesize it. My whole life, the press is telling me how great corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans are, because they both agree on economic issues. Are there other differences? Sure, if a Democrat had won in 2016 instead of Trump, we'd have a Supreme Court that's 6-3 liberal, at least on social issues, as opposed to a court that's 6-3 in favor of conservatives. So yes, there are differences, but on economic issues, the same corruption affects both parties. And again, the mainstream media never, ever tells you about it. I mean, look at that statement the guy said. Now PG&E is a good company because they show up in front of the California Utilities Commission. Well, what the hell were they doing before? They didn't even show up in front of the people regulating them. Why? Because they run the place. They didn't need to show up. They already bribed the Democrats. I always remember Eric Olson's line. He was a local progressive who ran in 25th district in California, okay, for a local seat. And he said, wait a minute, Democrats have a supermajority in California. Who are we negotiating with? Well, by definition, we're not negotiating with the Republicans. Oh, we're negotiating with the donors. And that is indisputable. Isn't it amazing that none of the mainstream media in California noticed that very obvious fact? So that is why when pg&e, I mean, why are you letting a natural monopoly donate to politicians? That is a recipe for disaster. Anyone can tell you that, except no one will tell you that. It's because the corporate media and the corporate politicians are one and the same. They're disgusting, and in this case, they got a lot of people killed. And now they say, oh, congratulations. Now you're gonna have to root for the company that burned your family's house down. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.